What's up, Penn State fans? Day 6 of the 15-day transfer portal window is here. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The Nittany Lions have been active in the transfer portal as the first roster of the Matt Campbell era continues to be built. T. Frank, we're right around 50 outgoing Penn State transfers, somewhere in that ballpark anyway. We are right around 25 additions for Penn State via the transfer portal, and we are right around 30 Penn State players announcing that they are coming back to Penn State, although as we learned on Tuesday, and we'll talk about on today's show, that does not always guarantee that guys are going to come back. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, kind of in the same boat as you, of like the minute you feel like, okay, maybe I'm almost caught up, and by the way, absolutely not caught up whatsoever. Then more stuff happens. Last night I was getting done with some Dejan Lane conversation on the message board and writing articles about it. It happened while I was recording a video, so like the impromptu breaking news. And then James Peoples decides to commit in the evening, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm getting to that tomorrow. So yeah, always something to talk about here, which is why I'm trying to do 2-a-days during this portal season, where we're doing a live show Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and also like a video every day to kind of recap a different aspect of what's going on in the transfer portal from at least my perspective on all these things. So it's been very busy, as you know well, and as Penn State fans, I think here's my question. Is it exciting or is it too much? Because Penn State fans were loving all of the positive news, but like there is this chaotic swirl of now guys are leaving the team after saying they were staying, and like, is the news fatiguing at a certain point, or is it still like, dude, I love every update, give me all the information?
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what those of you watching live in the chat say about that, or if you're listening on replay, let us know either over on the Lions Den message board at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, on social media, or of course in the comment section. I mean, I think most Penn State fans knew that this would get pretty crazy, T. Frank. I don't know if all of them, I feel like it's a majority, maybe didn't quite prepare themselves enough for the reality of this many guys leaving, this many guys coming via either Iowa State or another school via the portal, and this many guys putting out announcements of doing this and then doing that. You mentioned the situation with Lane and with Tysier Denmark, two guys who announced earlier this week, late last week, I'm not even sure what we're calling it at this point.
Right.
They were going to return to Penn State for the 2026 season, and both hit the transfer portal yesterday, Tuesday, January 6th. Not even the most notable guys in the sport to do that, because Damon Williams, the Washington quarterback who Penn State was supposedly going to face at some point this season, out in Seattle, a very talented, maybe the top returning quarterback in the Big Ten, is now apparently trying to leave the Huskies despite signing a deal with them per multiple reports, including from On3's Pete Nakos just 4 days ago. So you can be mad at Lane and Denmark for saying they're staying and then leaving all you want. I get it. At the same time, T. Frank, it's hardly the first time it's going to happen across the sport, and maybe even at Penn State over the next 15. Well, the rest of this has 10 days left, but certainly, there's more than just a 15-day window where this news is going to happen. So we'll see how it all plays out. Not the first time at Penn State or the college football world, either in this portal cycle or others. Might not be the last in this specific window for Penn State.
I had that thought when all of these decisions were coming down like Thursday and Friday of last week, and the thought of like, this is great, but there's 2 weeks to go. Like, the portal is still open, and I wish I would have just said that, because then it would have sounded very prophetic instead of making it sound like I'm trying to make myself smarter than I was in the moment. But yeah, like, this is all very tenuous of like, I have decided to return, and what is the binding resolution that makes any of that happen through all of this? And it's just like, it's kind of the same situation we saw with some of the coaching movement, where Deion Barnes was the Penn State defensive ends coach until South Carolina decided that he wasn't anymore. And so, yeah, head on a swivel. Keep your antennas up. The news is good, but it's also like, you got to make sure that these stick. And I don't know how to do that. Like, I'm not in the position of Derek Hoosier, the GM, or Matt Campbell.
Nor would you want to be, T. Frank. Nor would you want to be. At least not at this time of year.
No, not at this time of year. No, not necessarily in this environment as well. I think where you have to, like, after this year, this is likely not going to happen again for Penn State. But the merging of these two rosters is what they're trying to accomplish. And so the one side is easy in terms of convincing the guys that you've already convinced to go to battle with you, the Iowa State transfers, to go to Penn State, that's an easy decision in terms of like convincing those guys to be here. Keeping the other players that you're getting to know in the building, that has to be a maddening sort of thing when, all it takes is one phone call to somebody's agent, somebody's friend of a friend, somebody's former high school coach, and suddenly that you slip the piece of paper proverbially across the table, and suddenly like, okay, well, that changes all of my decision making, and there's not really, as far as I know, a recourse for any of that happening. Like, is that tampering? It's not necessarily tampering, and it's widely happening everywhere. So it's just, this part would be probably the worst part of like being on pins and needles until the door is closed. And until then, what did you say? We're 6 days into a 15-day window, or into whatever the window is. Like it's an opportunity, but also it's dangerous.
It is. It's very much. And if you want to keep track of the latest news, notes, changes of mind, discussion of opinion, as Bizzle says in the chat, it's great value to finally join BWI, the On3 website, bluewhiteillustrated.com. $50 for the whole year, he says, or she, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which. It says it's during a crazy rumor and info age. So you can see it on the screen there. Transfer portal special at Blue White Illustrated, 50% off the ultimate fan bundle, which includes Blue White Illustrated, On3, Rivals, and a full year of access to the Athletics. So check us out over there at bluewhiteillustrated.com. I want to get into, T. Frank, the list of players. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to interrupt you. I just wanted to say this on record in public. Nobody works harder than Greg Pickle in terms of the amount of content he generates, the quality of said content, and it has somehow gone up in the portal weeks that we've been here, and I include that in the pre-portal weeks of people making decisions. If you want to join Blue White Illustrated for the information and for the blow-by-blow stuff, there's nobody better than Greg, and you're not going to get a better view of what's going on with Penn State football. Nobody's going to keep you up to date better than Greg. So that alone is worth the yearly full price. You're getting it at half off, and you get everything else on top of that. So like, I don't know what else you would want other, from Blue White Illustrated. I enjoy being on this team so much, and Greg is one of the reasons why.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, T. Frank. I appreciate working with you. And to those listening who have subscribed, thank you for being a part of the community that supports us. If you're not subscribed over Blue White Illustrated, check it out. And if not, how about subscribing here for free to the BWI YouTube channel? We'd appreciate that as well. I want to get into the departed players. First, though, I just want to hit on a couple staff notes, T. Frank. Penn State has made its defensive line and defensive line hire and linebackers coach official. So I'm not even going to try his first name. I haven't got to look at the pronunciation guide yet, but Mallow from UCLA.
I looked this one up. Akaika Malloy.
Thank you. Is the new defensive line coach coming over from UCLA. He coached with the Bruins when DeAnton Lynn was there for one season in 2023. And he is also going to be working with Tyson Veet, the former Cincinnati defensive coordinator who left Iowa State under Matt Campbell previously to take the job with the Bearcats. He's going to be the linebackers coach. Dan Connor, Penn State letterman, is being retained as the assistant linebackers coach, which leaves running backs coach left to fill, T. Frank, and everyone wants to know what the answer is going to be there. And I guess I don't have the answer right now. I don't. But what I will say is that 2 portal running backs have committed to Penn State as we talk at 10:09 a.m. Eastern time, and they have a 2026 running back, the Sheffy kid out of State College, on campus right now for an official visit. They have other running backs on campus for an official visit. So there's a lot of Penn State fans wringing their hands over this lack of a running backs coach, and I guess what I would tell you is whatever Matt Campbell is telling these guys behind the scenes, they seem to be buying, and at the very least, it's not keeping them from visiting. And so I think that I just think that, when it gets done, it gets done. And they certainly seem to be telling whatever these kids, whatever they're telling these kids, the kids seem to be receptive of it. I think you can just rest easy that whenever it gets done, it gets done. And it'll be in a way that Penn State fans will probably like.
Yes. And I just want to reference some of the moves they've made that I find interesting in the context of, like, they don't have the running backs coach yet, but what they've done at certain positions I find really interesting, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, no specific tight ends coach. Taylor Mauser is going to be the tight ends coach and the offensive coordinator. So one less coach in a certain sense there from what the what the previous staff did in terms of volume of coaching bodies on the field giving individual attention to players. And that is on the flip side from the defense, where you have a former defensive coordinator as a linebackers coach, former DC as the D-line coach, who is specifically going to be the defensive tackles coach, and then another defensive line coach being the defensive end coach, a former linebacker coach as the assistant linebacker coach, and a former interim head coach as the cornerbacks coach. There's a lot of experience on the defensive side of the staff. Oh, and by the way, they have a defensive coordinator on top of all of those former coordinators, so they are going to have a lot of experience on that side of the ball. And I find that to be in keeping with how this has really gone, right? So offense, Matt Campbell, he's going to be the head of the ship over there. So maybe some of that coaching and some of those things from his perspective, he would like fewer voices in the room, right? And then from the defensive side of the ball, you have Danton Lynn, who this is only his third year being a defensive coordinator, right? So Correct. Adding experience on that side of the ball, adding as much wisdom and years of perspective, all of these things make sense, and I think that it's a solid plan to start. And then from the running back perspective, when you look at how the offensive staff is all in place, you know what you're going to get from the system. You know what you're getting from the offensive line. You know what you're going to be asked to do, and then it's just who's going to be teaching you about how to go ahead and do that. It is an important piece, but it is not like they don't have 95% or 90% of the picture in place for some of these guys. So that to me makes sense how they're able to operate, and maybe it's not the most important thing in the world to get that one specific coach in the room to get these guys to be interested in coming to campus or coming to Penn State.
Right. And so I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, too, is that the staff build-out is really just starting for Matt Campbell. I think we'll see some other guys. One I'm watching, you talk about that tight end position room. Sam, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right, Seumbacher was the assistant tight ends coach for Matt Campbell and Taylor Mauser at Iowa State. When Taylor Mauser won the Broyles Award as the top tight ends coach in the country, he gave all the credit to Sam Seumbacher, which, I guess on one hand you would say, what else would he do? On the other hand, as the offensive coordinator and position coach, I'm sure he had a huge role in what that tight end development looked like at Iowa State for Ben Brommer and the others. So a name to keep in mind there. We'll see if he ends up coming to State College or not. Certainly could be a guy who wants to be a full-time position coach somewhere else, and so time will tell on that front. But yeah, the staff build-out is just, really getting underway for Matt Campbell. A bunch of new names were added to the Penn State directory overnight. You can go check out that full list at bluewhiteillustrated.com. I don't want to get too far into the weeds because it's a lot of titles that, there's a lot of names and a lot of titles of people who will be very important to the on-field and off-field success of the Penn State football program, but to sit here and read them all out to everyone, I think would be fairly boring. You're talking about, the addition of assistant strength coaches and director of on-campus recruiting and roles that, much like when James Franklin took that initial group of 10 with him to Blacksburg in the middle of the Penn State season, like when Matt Campbell came from Iowa State to Penn State, T. Frank, he brought that initial group of people that he felt like he had to have with him to get set up and get things rolling. And he would obviously need more people to come with him at some point. And they've been slowly adding that group of people, and they just added the big bulk of that support and off-field staff overnight. So you can go check out all those names, bluewhiteillustrated.com. But I think the biggest thing that just impress upon people, T. Frank, and there's a real reason I don't want to get into the weeds with this, is because I think you might be one of the few people qualified enough to maybe have the conversation about the quality or lack thereof or benefit or whatever, however you want to phrase it, of a strength staff 1 versus a strength staff 2. But it is going to be an all-new strength staff, all-new nutrition staff. Sports performance looks like it'll be all new too. So all that stuff is changing in the Matt Campbell era, for better or worse. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and that's where I'm interested to meet some of these people and understand their philosophies about how they want to build their athletes, what they focus on, because there is differences. The thing that I find interesting is sports science doesn't change. How you develop the athlete is it's been proven. It is a simple but difficult process of building muscle and explosive tissue, right? So I don't want to get into the science of it, but there are other things you can do. You can focus on strength and maybe not explosive movement skills, and you want bigger athletes. You want guys that are stronger but maybe not as explosive. And these all kind of characterize the style of athlete you want. And then, like, do you follow those protocols? Do you believe in those sciences, or do you have like different views on certain things? I got to imagine most strength and conditioning coaches in college football, kind of believe the standard sports, or I shouldn't even say believe, because these are proven facts, like in science, of how you build muscle tissue, how you build athletes. Like, these are proven things, and then it's just like, what kind of direction do you want to go within that? What's your flavor of that? And so I'm interested to see and get to know those things, because it will dictate at certain positions what the priority is, because it's not. Right. Certain positions, you need more strength than you need speed, right? And you need more size than you need mobility. And what are the decisions from player to player or from position to position that could be different than previously? I feel like I see differences already in the type of athlete that they're recruiting in the portal and the type of athlete that they've shown that they recruit at Iowa State. And so then what is the end result? What are the things you're trying to do with those players? I'm very interested in all that, because it is absolutely essential to the success of the program and generally health of a football player, health of a team, the injury-prone thing. You cannot prevent, to a certain degree, you cannot prevent muscle injury. Like, muscle injuries are the things you can prevent. I'm sorry, I'm starting from the wrong place where my brain wanted to start. Soft tissue injuries are what strength and conditioning programs can prevent. So broken bones, ligaments, things like that, you can't necessarily prevent those from happening. But injury prevention, from pulled hamstrings to pec injuries, things like that, you can, with sports science, build more resilient athletes. And Chuck Losey was very good at that. Penn State had very few of those. They had more of the unfortunate ACL injuries and things like that, more of the ligament tears, which is ironically sometimes, I don't know this to be scientific fact, more tied to, hey, your athlete is too explosive. They generate too much force that their own body can't handle at times. It does seem to be that the freakish athletes are the ones that get hurt a lot in those situations. So, it is a rundown of all the important parts of the strength and conditioning program that we haven't really talked about, because we're focusing on kind of the celebrity positions, right? The coaches on the field, the players, etc.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. So we will learn more about all of that. It's just, I hate to say it on January 7th, but a lot of the answers that are coming up in the chat right now about the roster this, the roster that, is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Will it be the same? So on and so forth. Will this coach be an upgrade over that coach from last year? And so we'll get a better feel for it as the year unfolds. But when you consider where Penn State opens its season against Marshall, Temple, and somebody else, it's going to be a while, until we get a complete picture. And look, I was telling somebody this the other day. If we're having what's the word I'm looking for here? Validating or opinionated conversations about the Penn State team and what it's going to look like in 26 under Matt Campbell and co. after 3 weeks of the 26 season, probably means Penn State lost to somebody it shouldn't have, depending on how the schedule goes. Just looking at how the schedule breaks down. So anyway, that's a conversation for another day. This is BWI Live. It's the Wednesday, January 7th show, 10:18 a.m. Eastern Time. It's Thomas Frank Carr and Greg Pickle from Blue White Illustrated talking live. We have not had any news break yet, but you never know, so stay tuned for that. Because, as you noted, T. Frank, there are undecided players yet to declare one way or the other whether or not they will be back at Penn State in 2026 to play for this new staff. It's a pretty good sized list of them. And what I would caution people to note, or I guess to remember here, is that there are guys who did not feel the need, like I believe it was Vega Awani was one of them last year, that didn't feel the need to come out with a statement saying he was not going to go early or to the draft, or he was going to return. There were a couple others as well that just appeared on the program's 2026 roster, and that was that. And so some guys don't care to play the announcement game of, I'm back, or we are, or whatever it may be. Kind of curious now to see if some guys maybe aren't a little if they were planning to do it, maybe a little bit shy to do it. We're seeing what happened with Tyser Denmark and Lane, and knowing that it's possible that they might change their mind. Once you don't go into the portal when it closes, it's a heck of a lot easier to put that announcement out there, knowing there's no mind changing that can happen compared to right now, where there's still 6 days left to enter the portal, plus the 48 hours that the compliance departments get on top of that.
Yeah, I would. That's exactly. If I were in this situation, I were one of these players, and I don't really know what my future is with this particular program. I probably wouldn't say anything, but be checking like, hey, what are my options before I go into the portal? Because that's what I think we talk a lot about. There's a lot of conversation about these sympathy cases of somebody who went into the portal and then didn't find a home. And like, this is so bad for college athletes, so bad for college football. And yes, but it was also a voluntary decision on a lot of cases. Like a guy went into the portal thinking, I'm going to find, I want to get paid, I want money, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's just not out there. And so if you want to, secure a spot, if you want to make sure, hey, I'm going to play for a Power 4 football team in 2026, go into the portal with a plan. And then make sure that plan is pretty secure before you make those decisions. Some of the guys that have done that are guys that had options, right? We talk about Dejon Lane. Dejon Lane was an odds-on starter on this team. Like, yes, I know they brought in 2, maybe even 3 Iowa State safeties. I haven't even checked at this point. Like how many they've actually brought in. But Dejon Lane was the most talented athletically of that group. And everyone's going to be in a new defense under Danton Lynn this year. So odds on he was going to be a starter or at least one of the 3 players that rotates heavily at safety. And so to me, that looked more like an opportunity play with him in the transfer portal. If you're a guy that doesn't have any film, let's say, let's pick up Michael Troutman, a guy that I think can play at this level, but doesn't have any film. Are you guaranteed to get a spot as good?
Yet, right.
Yeah, hasn't made his announcement yet. Or here's another one, Josh Johnson. Another guy with talent is Xavier Thomas at cornerback. That might be the best one, is a guy who's not like overly big. He's not a guy that doesn't have these like traits that you would say, oh, we have to have that guy if you're coaching the portal, that has like, I need height, weight, speed guys. But he's probably a good football player, probably can play at this level. And so you don't want to go into the portal unless you absolutely know, like, I'm going to go to X place. And so we may not know, and we might not hear anything because they might not get any news, and then they're just on the roster at the end of January.
Yes, and so I'm not sure when we'll see the first Penn State roster of 2026, T. Frank. Typically, we would see it like, I don't know, maybe just before the Super Bowl or right around the time the Super Bowl ends. In the NFL, we'd see the first Penn State roster of 2026. Who knows about this year, buddy? I mean, keep in mind.
Well, are we going to have a February media day like we used to have in February? Kind of the turn the page to 2026 for the football program. James Franklin would talk in the offseason. We get to meet the redshirt freshmen. All those things. Now, like, who knows? We might not talk to anybody until spring football.
Right, and got to keep in mind, too, that Penn State expects to add to the high school class of 2026, which, of course, won't sign until the first week of February, around roughly a month from now, on this first Wednesday of January. So we'll see how things shake out. But, yeah, there's a lot to figure out, for this Penn State roster. And so, I'll be interested to see what other additions are made, what other subtractions happen, if any, and if any more guys come out and make their decisions clear. Again, I do think that some guys probably know they're coming back, T. Frank, but want to leave their options open until, they just wait and see how things shake out with the rest of the portal. And some guys might, decide that they are more than likely leaving, but maybe somebody else moves on that moves them up the depth chart, the roster, and they decide to stay. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
I want to talk about running back here because it's the one position that I'm keying in on that I haven't seen a ton of. How do I phrase this? I think they've got a lot of good football players there and guys that will be productive, but I don't see any difference makers. James Peoples, I think, is a good football player. I think he is what I've noticed from the Iowa State running backs and what I've noticed from the guys they've scouted, they are guys that are going to get the yards that are there. They're going to run within the scheme, and maybe dynamism, tackle breaking, all that stuff is an added bonus. Carson Hansen is a very valuable player because I think he's a smart guy that has good size and speed, but not breakaway speed and not size to break tackles. So he's going to get you, and I keep saying this, going to get the yards that are there. He's going to get what the offense gives him, and he's going to make good awareness plays to run to space. The guy that I see that right now has the most upside in terms of dynamic ability to break tackles, be a downfield threat, is Quentin Martin. And he needs to get bigger. Again, next offseason in a row, Quentin Martin needs to get bigger, and more physical to break more tackles and to really to deliver on his abilities. Tyke Hayes is the guy to me that has that in terms of physical, athletic, makes people miss. I think he's a pretty important retention piece. I don't know how much they value specifically running back, because it kind of feels like running back is a part of the machine, but they're more invested in the guys that block and the guys that catch and throw than the guys that run, which is an NFL perspective. But that is kind of speculation on my part, just because I don't know necessarily that they have. This is my opinion of the players that they have brought in or targeted. So running back is one that I am keeping an eye on, because the guys they brought in kind of are on a one-note runner. Downhill, one cut, making guys miss is not necessarily as important as following the blocks and getting to space. So I just wanted, if you're wondering about that, like I am as well, like are they going to bring in some guys with some dynamism at that position?
Does that bring us into our transfer portal edition evaluation part of the show? Is that a good way to start to move along there?
I think it is. Yeah.
Alrighty, cool. Well, Penn State, if you missed it, and I'm not sure how you did, because Penn State fans got really super excited about James Peoples committing from Ohio State to Penn State on Tuesday night. And, you know, I think that obviously I sense the frustration, T. Frank, with the Penn State fan base, because Penn State was kind of racking up all these Iowa State guys, and Penn State fans just desperately want it. You know, somebody else, someone
they want Nick Marsh. They want splashy name.
Yeah, that, you know, could confirm, or however you want to put it, the fact that Penn State, this new staff can do more than just recruit Iowa State guys. And so you get it with a number of defensive linemen earlier on Tuesday, and then James People later in the day on Tuesday. I'm not sure if you guys were on the air, T. Frank, when the defensive lineman committed. I can't recall.
I did a separate video later in the day about those guys.
Okay, so you got your thoughts out there on that group. What do you think of the running back edition?
Yeah, we can go over those again if you want, like for people that didn't check that out. Yeah, I just kind of said about James People, I think let me pull up my notes specifically, because he's not a guy that likes to create. He's kind of a downhill runner, doesn't like to bounce, solid, sound running back. He doesn't take a lot of risks, and I think he's a good athlete. I think he's a good football player. This is the problem, is that Ohio State and their run game was bad last year. Like, it just wasn't good. They didn't block for these guys to give them space. And so I don't want to take credit away from a guy like James Peoples for not breaking tackles at the line of scrimmage. Like, there's only so many Katron Allens in the world that will just make something out of nothing. You know, the silk purse from a sow's ear if you're old enough and your grandma was born during the Depression. But he didn't elevate the situation the way Bo Jackson did. Bo Jackson ran harder through contact, broke more tackles, and got more yards. And 2 years in a row, Peoples was passed by somebody else from either off the roster, or, you know, when he was a freshman with Quinshon Junkins coming in, or a freshman this year. So there is a certain profile of this is a good running back that will get you yards, and he's going to be a professional college running back. But is he going to break a lot of tackles? If you get him into open space more, is he going to break a lot of tackles? And I think there's opportunity for that. I don't want to ever take away a guy's, upward ceiling as a guy that could do more in a better situation. But I don't know that that's the case with Peoples. So to me, they've got a stable of running backs that do the job. Very workman-like running backs. And then you got Quentin Martin Jr., who is more dynamic, but at 6'2", needs to be 215 to 217 pounds to deliver on that size.
Yeah, interesting offseason ahead for Tyke Hayes as well. One of the guys who has not mentioned yet what he is going to do for the 2026 season. We know Jabri Coleman is moving on, Cam Wallace is moving on, Corey Smith moving on, and obviously Nick Singleton and Katron Allen off to the NFL. Ryan makes a pretty fair, I guess you could say, fair point. Yeah, it's a fair point. He says, Peoples is a nice player, nothing special or anything close to what we've had in the past 5 years, talking about Penn State, of course, having certainly Singleton and Allen in addition to some other recruits that they've had. I mean, I think that is really going to be maybe the biggest obstacle for Penn State fans this offseason to overcome when they're looking at what this roster could be, both just as it is and also for the 2026 season, is that the comparisons are going to be to a lot of older, more experienced, more guys with more production at the college level. You think this was a 6-6 team that returned so much talent from one that went to the college football playoff semifinal. Well, I guess it ended up 7-6, but the point being, you're going to be comparing a lot of these replacements for starters that played a lot of football with guys who maybe haven't played a lot of football, or if they did, haven't done it the way that some of the guys that they're expected to replace do. So it's just going to be an interesting way to have this conversation moving forward. Peoples is, again, I think it's an interesting pickup. Everyone's going to point to the hurdle he had earlier this year and point to that as proof that he can do something more at Penn State. We'll just have to wait and see. I don't think it's a slam dunk yet. I don't think it's a fumble out of bounds yet either. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. And we'll see what else they do at this position.
To me, I'm going to say it again. It looks like from the outside looking in, the most valuable thing to them are the guys blocking and creating the opportunity. And I think that's the right way to build a run game. It's about the guys that get you the opportunity to run 10 yards downfield and attack a safety, because that's how football works. Like, people glorify the running back and the quarterback and the receiver because they have the ball in their hands. But the offensive line sets the table for what those players can do. And only the quarterback can independently fix problems for the offensive line through his decision-making and scrambling in the passing game. Running backs can do that in the run game, and that's where I go to broken tackles and yards after contact, because that is where the running back, that's his job. Saquon Barkley used to tell me all the time, my job is to make one player miss. They get me to the safety, I got to make that guy miss. He told that to countless people. That's been the refrain in the Penn State running back room for 10 years. And so, missed tackles and yards after contact are really important. And, just for an example here, Carson Hansen had a really good year last year, 952 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, but 3 yards after contact. Katron Allen, Nick Single, the Katron Allen, I think, had 4 at the highest of his career. So that's an extra yard every single run. Right. He's broken 40 tackles in the last 2 years. That's fine. Those are fine numbers. They aren't necessarily what you think of a 6'2", 220-pound back. And so I think their offensive line could be pretty good next year. The athletes up front, I like those. And if you give this guy opportunity, that's what you're going to get. And so to me, that's the run game. And I think it's pretty simple. But if you want more than that, I don't know if that's going to be what they get out of this offense right now. Anyway, that's my read of the situation.
All right, well, this is the BWI Live Show, Wednesday, January 7th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where you can take advantage of our transfer portal special for 50% off an annual subscription by joining over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com today. Speaking of the portal, T. Frank, we might as well get into one of the highlights of today's show, our portal superlative picks. So the idea here is pretty simple. We're 1/3 of the way through the portal being open. So what that means, of course, is it's a 15-day window. Divide by 3. You obviously get five different thirds that the portal will take care of itself with. And so we're through the first one with the day 5 in the books yesterday, Tuesday, January 6th. So we're going to break it down for you guys, and you can let us know your thoughts in the chat or over on the Lions Den message board. But the picks are pretty simple. Best, in our mind, the best wins in terms of roster retention, the best wins in terms of non-Iowa State and Iowa State pickups, and the best, or the losses that hurt the most and the biggest surprises. So we're going to start at the top here, T. Frank?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, the biggest win for Penn State in terms of the group of Iowa State transfers, which as we talk here stands, I think, at 20 or 21. I think it's 20.
Yeah. It might have been, no, it's 21 because they got one. They had 19 and then they got 2 linemen. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's 20 or 21. You're right.
It's right around there. At any rate, your pick for the best one of the group, most impactful one of the group. I use the term best. I hate doing that because you can qualify that a couple different ways. But who are you taking here? Who's your pick?
Well, you took the correct answer. So I went to the defensive side of the ball and went with Marcus Neal, the safety. I think a guy you build around in a couple of different ways. One, he is unbelievably dynamic as a run defender. He is a tone-setting, culture-setting football player on the defensive side of the ball. He is a menace in the run game. He's physical. He's aggressive. He will pursue things from one side of the field to the other, and he doesn't miss tackles. Those are all really good things. Coverage, they hid him in the Iowa State secondary last year as a coverage player. Now, part of that was that role dictated he was in the middle of the field. He wasn't in a deep coverage all that often, but those go hand in hand, right? A guy that doesn't maybe have four speed at safety. So he's going to be, I think, the heartbeat of the defense, which is why I went with Marcus Neal as the young up-and-coming star on that side of the ball for the safety. I think he'll play the boundary safety, a guy that's going to insert in the run game and be a quasi-linebacker.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting addition for this Penn State team in 2026 for the first Matt Campbell roster. Like T. Frank said, I went with the obvious selection. It was Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht, multi-year starter for head coach Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Very productive guy there in the Big 12. Is he perfect, or is he a guy who's a top, 2026 NFL draft boards? I mean, not really, no. But is he a very serviceable quarterback that can take this Penn State offense to somewhere I think Nittany Lion fans would like, depending on how the pieces around him and he work? Yes. And so, like T. Frank said, that was the obvious selection. Look, I mean, they had to get the quarterback pick in. It's not saying Matt Campbell will be right to go with the guys he knows in Rocco Becht and Alex Mansky over keeping Ethan Grunkemeyer and Jackson Smolik. But I think we all knew that was probably going to be the case. And if they could have somehow talked Grunkemeyer into staying, considering Becht only has a year left, great. But I also can't blame Ethan Grunkemeyer for saying, you know what, you're bringing your guys in, and I'm going to go find my own guys somewhere else, which looks like it'll be Virginia Tech. So I really don't blame anyone in this decision-making process, Steve Frank. If you're Matt Campbell, you have to start off with a quarterback you know and trust. And I'm not saying he couldn't have got there with Ethan Grunkemeyer, but if you have one already known to you entering his fourth year as a starter who just has to enter the portal to come play for you, I think we all said it was writing on the wall.
Yeah, and all of that is absolutely fair, and all of that is absolutely, I think, the context and perspective we should have. Here's my problem. I wrote about this, and I did 2 articles grading portal retention for the offensive staff, and I understand that. The portal grade for bringing in Rocco Becht is going to be like an A- to an A+. Somewhere in the obvious, you nailed it, bringing in your quarterbacks that you believe in. Here's the problem. If Ethan Grunkemeyer goes on to be a really good football player and obviously better than Rocco Becht, nobody will care. They will only say, well, you had the opportunity and you didn't keep Ethan Grunkemeyer. And so in this binary, no nuance world that we live in of hot takes on the internet, I think there is a conversation about, well, you didn't keep both, as much as that would have been a monumental task. It is what it is. There is a binary pass-fail relationship with the quarterback position that I don't think is fair, but it's the world we live in. And so, part of this is me explaining that retroactively about some of the conversation we had on the YouTube channel and elsewhere, but also, Rocco Becht better be good. He better be the right answer, and I think he is the biggest win here. I think what he does in the system is obviously translatable to what they're bringing over, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but he's not perfect. There are flaws to his game. I don't think he's as accurate as Ethan Grunkemeyer. So the slam dunkness feel of the quarterback decision, I think there's fair reason to be skeptical, or there's fair reason to wait and see with how this decision plays out.
Right. And we will certainly do that. Just want to get to a news bit here, as Ryan Snyder reported on the message board and via story form over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Former Penn State Director of Player Personnel Kenny Sanders leaving the Nittany Lions. He is headed to Notre Dame. Looks like that news is breaking on social media now as we record this show. So
that's a
longtime
huge
Penn State
blow.
Longtime Penn State assistant and member of James Franklin's staff here a couple different times at Penn State. Looks to be headed to South Bend, so best of luck to him. But we'll get back to the Penn State portal talk now until something else interrupts us. That's been the theme of the week, and I'm pretty sure Penn State fans following along know this. You'll be talking to your friends, or you'll be reading on social media about one topic related to Penn State, and then all of a sudden you'll see a rush or have to change the conversation to a different conversation. So just
one note on that before we
go.
Before we move on, going to Notre Dame is a huge problem. Penn State has made their living, and we'll see what this staff does, because they obviously have ties to different programs. There might be more recruiting from the Midwest for Penn State, but their ties to the region, a lot of them flowed through these alums and Kenny Sanders. Kenny Sanders going to Notre Dame, who has already established a foothold in Pennsylvania in this last cycle and has been very good in the Northeast traditionally, but losing Kenny Sanders to Notre Dame specifically feels like a force multiplier on the negative side for Penn State. That is something they're going to have to overcome. They're going to have to make these relationships with those schools in order to maintain their ability to recruit these players to Penn State from that Maryland DMV area. You got James Franklin at Blacksburg. Now you've got Notre Dame out there with Kenny Sanders. Like, the competition is going to be fierce. And Penn State's got to find some way to build those relationships quickly, or else they risk falling behind. And that's going to be something we follow on the recruiting show for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Don't forget the recruiting show back tomorrow. I shouldn't speak out of turn, but I assume we're back to our normal schedule here. So
yes.
The recruiting show back on Thursday, January 8th, with the guys joining T. Frank. And there will be certainly no lack of recruiting and transfer portal news to talk about. So anyway, back to the transfer portal superlatives for Penn State 5 days into the 2026 loan transfer portal window. Remember, there's no spring window, so what you do now is what you're going to do for the 2026 season. T. Frank, your biggest non-Iowa State win is? I'm going to give you a second here. All right, you're back. Your biggest win is?
Almost had a sneeze, so I didn't want to sneeze on camera. I'm going to go with Alexander McPherson. I mean, it's a short list here, right? So the non-Iowa State names, there's only a couple of them. He is, and I said this on the breakdown yesterday, there is a path to him being a dominant number one style edge rusher that is not going to look like Penn State's speed rushers, athletic, explosive freaks off the edge of years past. But he could be a length and strength sort of winner where he is a dominant bull rusher and a guy that uses his hands and his length to disengage. He's got a big frame. I think there's strong upward trajectory for a guy that came into Colorado as a pretty well-developed defensive end from a fundamentals perspective, and I probably overrate those things because they are the things that can be taught, but also strength is something that can be developed, like we talked about previously. And this is going back to the staff and what they want out of their players. What do they look for? I think the thing that they want from their edge rushers is length and power. And because those players can be all-around players to stop the run and to play multiple positions along the defensive line and to still be able to rush the passer from the edge with these other tools that aren't like 1,000% explosive speed. Just speed, and speed. McPherson has enough speed to be a threat on the edge. And then if you can translate that speed into power and strength and multiple moves. Think of some of the guys that they've coached in the past, Laiatu Latu for Maloe and what he was able to do at Washington with some of those players. They weren't speed-only players. He had a lot of power and strength players in the past, and that's my projection for what McPherson can be. The projection is he actually has to get stronger and deliver on what his frame potential is. I think it's reasonable, but we'll have to see if that is actually what happens.
Yeah, he was my runner-up selection. And just for the record here, I did this picking first, so T. Frank got stuck in some situations where he probably would have taken who I would have taken if given the opportunity to do so first. Alas, sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and no, that is not a Kalani Sitake joke. Okay. Biggest non-Iowa State transfer portal Penn State win for me is UCLA defensive tackle Keanu Williams. I just love, you look at what Penn State's losing on the defensive line, and it needs a big body defender. It really does in the middle of the defensive line. And for the new defensive line coach. And so, with you're losing Alonzo Ford, you're losing some other guys, and, Zane Durant, obviously not the biggest guy in the world, but you're losing him too. So I just think getting a big body there was crucial. You can recruit speed and maybe get it to the field faster than, some other spots, but you can't recruit size and experience size at that. He was a top 100 run grade defender per Pro Football Focus for interior defensive lineman in 2025 at UCLA. So,
and I don't think that was even his peak. I think he was better in 2023. So if he's healthier after an injury, kind of a mulligan year, there's more to give there from Keanu Williams for sure.
Right. So I just think that that's a really good pickup for Penn State. And the fact that you have his former defensive line coach signing off on that, I think is, is a pretty big deal, and time will tell if that all works out. All right, biggest loss, T. Frank, who you got? The biggest player that is leaving Penn State at this point in time, in your mind, is who?
Dejan Lane. Not only did he say he was going to stay, but what I said about Marcus Neal, I thought the pairing of Dejan Lane and Marcus Neal made a lot of sense. You would have a free and a strong. And Dejan Lane has the athleticism, the mobility to play that free safety role while still being a very good run defender in theory, because we saw him become a hitter in that Pinstripe Bowl against Clemson, where some of the instincts and the thinking stopped and the playing happened. And you saw why he was the most exciting safety commit since KJ Winston or Jaquan Brisker. And these guys coming over from Iowa State don't have that. Marcus Neal is a physical run defender, but I do have questions about his long speed. I do have questions about his coverage. You can mask those things, but if you want do-it-all safeties that you can put in any situation and you can really cause havoc and chaos in your coverage disguise, you need safeties that are versatile, where you can't predict this guy is going to be in the box and this guy is going to be deep, and right. Lane provided that to you. I am curious to see what kind of safety, what the plan is on the back end, because Danton Lynn is malleable in terms of the coverages he calls year to year based on the abilities of the players he has. So is this going to be more of a zone-based defense? Because at Iowa State, all the safeties, all the corners, it was a almost purely zone. They played man maybe 7% of the time, something like that, maybe 8% of the time, and everything else was zone. Penn State's corner room is more flexible. They can do a bunch of different things. So how does all this fit together, and what's the plan they build? It was more flexible with Lane. It's less without him.
So I had a different pick over at BlueWhaleIllustrated.com. You can go check that story out now. I will just go with the obvious one because I can already see it in the comments. And Chaz Coleman, pretty big loss for Penn State. I went a different direction simply because, and I'll talk about this player maybe a little bit later in one of the other sections, but simply because of the potential he had. And you see that there was no shortage of schools jumping in the mix to host him. Lane Kiffin quickly got him to LSU. Tennessee, Jim Knowles, Anthony Poindexter quickly got him down to Knoxville for a visit. I believe he is either at or just leaving Ohio State. So those are three obviously major contenders for him. And you just can't find pass rushers like that. So the question, of course, was size. He had to add more strength. There's no doubt about that. We heard Terry Smith talk about midseason, how he got sick and how he lost some weight and things like that. But even before that, he was not necessarily ready to hold up against the run in the Big Ten. So certainly every indication, though, T. Frank, was that size was coming at some point, and he just needed time, and it's going to happen somewhere else.
Yeah, and you can't.
You would just prefer, I think, if you're Penn State, you just hope like heck he somehow doesn't end up going to Ohio State instead.
Go to LSU,
to the SEC.
Go to Tennessee. Yeah. One of those situations. The whole situation was super unfortunate because you talk about his skills and his unique abilities. Jim Knowles talked about building plays around individual players. And they built a lot of plays around Denine Dennis Sutton last year. And respectfully, like athletically, not the guy I would build plays around. It'd be Chaz Coleman. But he's a true freshman. Are you going to do, is that seriously what you're going to do? Next year, yes. Yes, that is what you're going to do. And it's funny. I'll tell this story again. We were in the weight room for winter conditioning. And it was a very funny moment in just the context of the situation where everyone's lifting, right? And this just like freak athletes. I like to lift, like it's a hobby of mine. And so I'm watching dudes doing like a lot of weight on normal reps where most people can't even imagine, they can't conceive the amount of weight they're doing. So comparatively, you're standing there and you're watching Chaz Coleman do an incline bench press. And while he's doing it, his butt comes out of the seat. And they keep telling him, get your butt down, get your butt down. Get your butt down. And he does in order to lift the weight, he has to get his whole body into it. But the weight he was lifting was 225 pounds on an incline bench press, which, by the way, is a lot. Most people can't bench that on a flat bench. So the comparison of he was just a baby in the weight room and he did all those things, and now he's going to have another offseason where he's going to be doing all those lifts right. Look out. Because next year it's just like you said, too bad it's not going to be at Penn State for Nittany Lions fans.
Yes, they certainly would have loved to have kept him, but at the end of the day, not in the cards for Penn State. Most surprising losses. We already talked about one of these guys, so I'll just kind of skip through this a little bit. But we both went with the two guys who said they were coming back and then left, Tyser Denmark and Dewan Lane. Look, it just is what it is. I think guys say they are going to come back. And then I think T. Frank made the point earlier in the show, but all it takes is one phone call. All it takes is one connection to somebody else or one upping of an offer from somebody who gave you one previously that wasn't good enough that all of a sudden is, and you think to yourself, okay, maybe I can renegotiate this. So, I was surprised that Lane left, period. I thought he would stick regardless. Denmark, I think I put this story up over on the Blue Illustrated message board, but like Denmark, I think we all had a good feeling would probably go. When he announced he was coming back, I double checked it and made sure it wasn't a fake account. And then so to learn he was actually going to leave was, not as shocking. But just the process, the way it played out, I guess, is what puts that in the surprise category.
So I don't want to paint with a broad brush, even though that's kind of what we do. But it was a weird fit. I think he's a weird fit for this particular offense. The thing I'm trying to give the defining traits that I see from Iowa State's offense and what they like. They like big, explosive, big-framed receivers that are downfield threats. Tyser Denmark is none of those things. He can be a great athlete. He can be a great football player. His separation and his change of direction, his short area quickness are all that's why he was a internet superstar and also a 4-star prospect. But his deep speed, his size, those don't mesh with this program. And so, is he going to be the slot receiver only in a situation? I said this on the show yesterday. They're going to play 3 tight ends. They're going to play 4 tight ends. And your slot receiver then becomes a diminished product. And if he's not going to play on the outside, Kobe Howard is going to have to find a way to fit into the offense. And Kobe Howard is more of those things. So losing Tyser Denmark, of these surprise losses, it's the biggest one from a perception standpoint that fans are going to talk about because it was free Tyser Denmark all year long. That might not make that big of a difference in the totality of the offense.
Speaking of Kobe Howard, both of us, I think, had him probably as a runner-up for the biggest and best retention piece for Penn State so far on offense. So that tells you right off the bat that we are not going to talk anymore about Kobe Howard in this portion of the show. So who are you going with, T. Frank? Who was your pick for the best retention on offense?
So I wanted to go with Owen Alasini. I actually didn't even have Kobe Howard as my runner-up because of the things I think that are important in the context of what Iowa State could bring over. They can bring over receivers. They can find receivers in the portal. As much as Kobe Howard is great, and I think that he was an important retention piece, to me, Andrew Rappelier is the guy because the tight ends they're bringing over, none of them block like Andrew Rappelier. And if you want to have that proven Big Ten element, I don't think Andrew was perfect as a blocker last year. He lost some, but he's a better blocker than these guys. And, Gabe Burkle was their primary blocking tight end. And I mean that in the sense that he lined up at Y right next to the tackle and that you had Brahmer as more of the move tight end. I'm not comfortable with either of their blocking translating to the Big Ten. I am comfortable with Andrew Rappelier being the number 1 tight end. So this is going to be an offense that features those players. And despite bringing those guys in, it may... in my mind, there's a perception that you could get the big plays from those other guys, but Rappelier, to me, will be the heartbeat of the tight end room because he does both at such a high level. And he can move. He can be a backfield H-back because these guys are 6'6" and 6'7". He's more versatile. There's more creativity you can do with Rappelier. I don't know that, I'm not convinced that the translation of those guys to the Big Ten will be as effective as everyone is perceiving it to be. It can be now because they have Andrew Rappelier and they can focus on doing what they're good at, which is being vertical receivers, and in Burkle's case, kind of that do-it-all kind of all-around tight end. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap here, but there isn't with blocking and Rappelier, and I think that was critical for this particular offense.
Yeah, he was an obvious candidate for my list as well. I went with Anthony Donko. I thought he looked good in the Pinstripe Bowl. If he can stay healthy, it really helps solidify a Penn State offensive line that is undergoing a lot of change. Even from the group that we saw play in the Pinstripe Bowl, we now know that Egan Boyer and TJ Shanahan are both following Phil Trautwein to Florida. So there's plenty of change coming to that offensive line, and to have a consistent presence at one of the tackle spots who also has the flexibility to move inside if need be, I just think can't be understated. So, to your point, you could have went a couple different ways here. That's like the best and worst part of doing superlatives is that you can't necessarily be wrong, but it doesn't mean you're the most right. And people have no issue telling you about that fact.
It's supposed to be fun, and so we'll remind everyone of the seriousness of giving out grades or superlatives for the roster 1/3 of the way through the transfer portal. Ryan asked this question earlier, and I think it comes back to the Anthony Donko thing. I wanted to throw it in here. He said, I'm curious how Campbell sees the body types for the O-line versus James Franklin. Do you expect to see guys change their body types over the offseason? I don't know. I only know frame perspective. They prefer tackles. They want guys that have the length to play on the outside. Some of their best tackles that they've had go to the draft or that they had play for them were 6'6" and above. Now, again, like Anthony Donko, they've had guys that are 6'5" play tackle. So I don't think they're going to be targeting the 6'5" body type as the primary guy that they want. I would imagine they're going to try and get as many pure tackles as possible because the aggressiveness in which they invested in that position. Malachi Goodman was almost my most important retention on offense because it was just so unexpected to have Owen Alasini, Malachi Goodman, two guys that aren't guaranteed to start, decide to stay for this offense because I'm fairly certain, again, this goes back to how are you building your running game? I think they're investing in the offensive line and the offensive linemen to keep 4 guys that can play tackle. To me, signals we want those body types. We value that specifically, and the guys they're bringing over are more guard body types that are bigger, 6'4", 325 sized players. But Penn State was doing that too, right? Venga Ioane, Anthony Donko playing guard at 330 or whatever he is. There's a lot of similarity there. There's a lot of similarities in general between these two offensive lines. They like guys that are athletic and mobile. They run a zone system. So all those things, I don't think there's going to be a lot of change. Ryan Clanton, I think, has done a great job with what he's worked with, and now he gets to work with more. And I'm excited to see that because I think there could be an increase in the execution for the offensive line as a whole, and they've got a lot of talented players to make that happen.
Right. There's no doubt about that. Last one on our list, best retention defense. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we have a couple others to get to, and I think most would agree. Yeah. When you get Ivan Kamaju and Darius Dixon both back, I think Penn State fans would have been thrilled to get one of them back, T. Frank. Penn State ends up getting both, at least at this point in time, as we sit here on January 7th with no indication that either won't be back in 2026. So it's about as good of a situation as you could ask for two guys that would have probably commanded quite a haul if they had entered the transfer portal.
Yeah, and Kemiju, length and strength kind of guy, not an explosive upfield athlete in the sense of in the molds of Abdul Carter and Chop Robinson. So I think he fits what they want to do from that perspective. And then Darius Dixon, the reason I picked him is because it was one of the more unlikely ones as a guy from Mater Dei in California, as a guy that could go anywhere and decided to stay at Penn State as the team's top cornerback. Kind of the Dejon Lane thing. There are guys that go into the portal because they want opportunity, and then there's guys in the portal because they have options. And Dixon would have had options, but as of now has decided to stay and play for Terry Smith. And I think keeping Jordan Lucas and Terry Smith on the roster, you look at the retention, and I'm now re-including Zion Tracy as a corner in this particular defense and not as a safety like he was in the other defense. That is now a nickel corner position. Having all 3 starters from the end of the season come back, losing 2 of your 4 starters, but the guys at the end of the year that they were rotating in and relying on, I think it's huge. It's an A+ effort to keep those guys. And it starts with Dixon, who looks like your cornerback 1 of the future.
There's no question about that, T. Frank, and Davian Collins back in the mix as well. So that secondary room should be in pretty good shape moving forward. We'll just have to wait and see. Speaking of moving forward, let's move on to our, final segment of the show, Best Bets. All right, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. If your bet loses, just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this your college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And you don't have too many more of them left to bet if you're going to make it legendary. So looking at the college football playoff situation coming up this weekend, obviously we will have 2 games, one on Thursday, one on Friday. It bothers me, Frank. I don't know why. It just does. I know college football yields to the NFL at all times and with good reason, but it's just so insane to me that we get to this point of the college football season, and with all this other stuff going on, you have a Thursday night game and a Friday night game, both semifinals. Thursday, Miami Ole Miss is at 7:30 at the Fiesta Bowl in Phoenix, and then on Friday we have Oregon, Indiana in the Peach Bowl, a semifinal at 7:30 on ESPN Friday. So I'm only going to use one of them in best bets this week. I like Ole Miss plus 3.5, and this is not a pick against Miami. It really isn't. It is just more the idea that I think this is a field goal game, and I really, even more so than anything else, I just think this whole who will Ole Miss have on its staff? Who will it not have? Which coach will be in with Lane Kiffin? Which coach will be in Phoenix with the Rebels? I just think it's all getting overplayed. I just like the way this Ole Miss team is operating right now. They certainly believe in themselves, and so does this Miami team. Should be a fantastic game. But to me, T. Frank, I'll take the points here if you're giving them to me. And not only are you giving them to me, but you're giving me a field goal plus the hook. So yeah, I'll take it.
Dan Lenning, going back to your original point about why is this game on a Thursday and a Friday? He made the point that they ceded Saturdays to the NFL by not playing playoff games every Saturday after conference championship weekend. And I think, he mentioned ending the season January 1st. The transfer portal can start after that. That made a lot of sense. Yeah. Greg, that made so much sense. I was like, oh, wow, that's an idea. And I know that the reason we're doing it this way is so that we can have the time-honored tradition of playing the Rose Bowl on January 1st or whatever. Rotate the New Year's Sixes. Which one is the national championship game that year? I mean, come on. There's a way to do. There's obviously a way to do this, but the arcane powers in college football that exist and that create a block against good ideas has been the problem in this sport for 20 years. So anyway, that's my best bets contribution, is talking about that.
And will continue to be, T. Frank. All right, my other two, I'm going to go to the NFL. One you may have an opinion on, one you may not. But I'm going to start with the one that I think you will have an opinion on. Bills-Jaguars. Jaguars are +1 for that AFC playoff game. Taking the point, give me the Jaguars +1 against the Bills on Sunday. Your thoughts on that matchup, T. Frank, and resident Buffalo Bills fan?
Max Hairston, their first-round corner, got injured late in the game against the Jets and is in a walking boot, and I think has already been ruled out for the game. This is a defense that's 30th against the run, is threadbare at corner, has had multiple injuries in the secondary, and has been wildly inconsistent at offense and defense all year long. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of trust in this team. I understand Josh Allen is the truth and all that stuff, but he also makes mistakes. He's not Tom Brady as far as his ability to diagnose and to make plays on time, on schedule, and not rely on the after the play magic. He's been banged up this year. Hopefully he's healthy after taking last week off. The Bills are a wild card in the playoffs, and I mean that in every sense, where they should have won the division, but they didn't. Yeah. And by the should have, I mean by perception. And now they are the most dangerous or the least dangerous team in the playoffs. And I don't know. And that's where I'm just a blind fan that watches them of who knows how it could go this week. One thing I do know is that they're going to get down early because they do not start fast and they're always down at halftime. So good luck.
All right, there is the Bills-Jaguars take from T. Frank. I threw that game in just for you, buddy. You're welcome. Last one for me is going to be Green Bay going on the road and winning at Chicago. I don't know. I've watched both these teams this year, and it's a very interesting game. I could have made a case the other way, but I like the case I made for the Packers stronger, so I will take them to win over the Bears in a NFC North playoff rematch.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't followed much what's going on. Jordan Love was my fantasy quarterback, and they got hurt, so my season was over in the playoffs. That's all I know about the Packers at this point. They're all hurt.
All right. Well, that is what you do also know is that that's our last best bet of the week. So let's get some info to you all, and we'll wrap up today's edition of BWI Live.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
All right, T. Frank, final thoughts, buddy, as we wrap up this edition of BWI Live. Look, the news, I'm sure, is coming at some point today.
Yep.
Without question, there will be either more portal entries or new commitments or new visitors, whatever it might end up being, possibly something from the class of 2026, possibly something from the realm of Matt Campbell's coaching staff, or just college football in general. News is coming, so don't miss it. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and subscribe and join us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 50% off an annual membership is live now via our transfer portal special.
We have one overtime question here from Stephen Light. He got it in late in the show, and I just wanted to get to it here. What is one critical player piece that we need to add in the portal, or can we have a successful 2026 season as is? So I still need to do a little bit of work on the Iowa State linebackers, but to me, the obvious thing is a veteran pass rusher. They need to have a guy that isn't a redshirt freshman or a guy who has medical eligibility of a freshman in Max Granville. So they very young at defensive end, and I think one more guy in that rotation that you think is a proven guy at the college football level, at the Big Ten level, Power 4 level, to get pressure on the quarterback is... That's a critical piece of this. And then more defensive tackles. You know, I'm not saying either or, you need both, but if you said they have to have one, I would say pass rusher over defensive tackle, because I like the two that they got the other day. And you're telling me they're not going to get another difference maker there? They can fill out with rotation and bodies. Okay. Pass rusher is the one that I think they need to get to.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I think that would make a lot of Penn State fans happy, and I think we'll just have to wait and see who else might end up visiting Penn State that the Nittany Lions could land for Matt Campbell's first season at Penn State. So for Thomas Frank Carr, I'm Greg Pickle. This has been another edition of BWI Live. Don't forget the recruiting show with T. Frank and with Ryan Snyder, and I almost played the heartbeat sound again. We don't need to do that. Nothing that exciting is happening. And Sean Fitz is coming up later this week on Thursday. So plenty of news and notes on the horizon for Penn State fans, also over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The transfer portal rolls on, and we'll be right there to cover it for you throughout the rest of this week and next, and the rest of the month of January, and the rest of 2026. So for T. Frank, I'm Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you next time on BWI Live.